Hi and welcome. This is Robert Lee Camp, the author of Cards of Your Destiny and Love Cards, and here today is another installment in our series on spiritual relationships. Now we're going to get into kind of the meat of this. We're going to talk about like what really happens in personal relationships. And you know, some of this stuff is so painful that I have seen many people in my years of doing readings, I've seen many people who just say, that's it, no more relationships. They'll go years, they might even go the rest of their life because it was so painful and they just didn't know what to do with it. They had no way of dealing with how painful it was. So they just said, I don't care. Relationships, I'm just going to let that go. That's what happens. So in any relationship, and especially in a relationship where you really open your heart and you found somebody that you really want to just totally take their love in and you want to totally give your love, you become very emotionally open. And they would say in some books that you become vulnerable at that point. You become emotionally vulnerable. Well, what does that really mean, emotionally vulnerable? It means now things that your partner says or does will have a greater impact on you for the positive and for the negative. I remember reading the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and he talks about, there's a chapter on love, and he says, don't go near love unless you're ready to go all the way and let love have its way with you, which is going to take you into not only the heights of the heavens, but also the depths of hell. Because when we open up for that love, but we're also going to encounter what I call, and a lot of spiritual teachers call, our conditioning. Now, it's just a word, but what it means is that we have, at some point in our past, had a painful situation out of which we left there with a belief that some people or our lovers or our partners, they don't love us. As a matter of fact, it's a belief that they are using us, or there's so many stories like they're either using us or they don't really care about us. They don't care enough to listen to me or whatever. There's 1,000 stories all about not being loved by the partner. And when a certain stimuli comes up in a relationship, and when you're very open, especially, and this is what I personally suggest, that you find a partner that you will be all the way open to, so that you know that you're really ready to go all the way for that kind of a love that you want. Don't settle for someone that's just really not right for you and doesn't have everything that you really want, because you're going to be putting everything on the line, okay? And when we do that, that means we're going to have a lot of stuff come up. If there's stuff in there, it's going to come up, okay? It's going to come up. So like, you know, you could just be driving and your partner says something, you're in the car together, and all of a sudden you get really upset. You get really upset. Now, there's major ones and there's minor ones. You know, there's minor ones where your partner is just not listening, or your partner doesn't confirm what you just said, and or they said something that seemed like a little bit of a put down to you. Now you're upset. Okay. And you may come back with some witty response that also puts them down to kind of get them back. There's all kinds of ways. There's thousands of ways this can play out. Okay? Now, to the extent, like some of these reactions that we have can be very severe. You know, they can be very severe. Like we could feel our reaction could be an all-out attack on our partner, actually. Physical relationships get physical even, you know. And then there's just the less intense ones where there's just banter, intellectual banter that's kind of a little put downs and stuff and back and forth, a little less intense, but it's still, once we're upset, we will start to do bad things to our partner because we are in that moment believing they did something to us. Okay, we have a belief that they have done something, they've said something that is unloving, and we're going to do something about it. We're either going to leave, or we're going to shut down, or we're going to fight. What are we going to do? You know, that's what's going to happen. The thing is that these things never get dealt with. In most cases, people aren't really dealing with these. They're not really like learning anything out of it. They're not getting an opportunity to have a different life experience. And I want to talk about how we can do that. But let's first talk about where this conditioning, I call, comes from. A lot of it comes from your past lives, believe it or not. I can look in the chart of a person, astrological chart, and I can see the aspects that show where they have conditioned responses in certain areas in relationship that are going to be a problem unless they work on it. It's going to come up. They're right there in the chart. Easy to see, you know. These things can come from our childhood, and we often blame a lot of the stuff on our parents in childhood. Actually, I think even the ones in childhood, most of them came from the past life. The parents were just the stimulus, the catalyst that set them off again in this lifetime. I have a particular pattern of feeling abandoned, and I have a story from my childhood where my mother left me in a crib in a dark room when I was 3 years old. And I remember this clearly. And I cried and nobody came, and it was dark and I was afraid. And it was terrifying. I talked to my mother about it. She doesn't remember it. Never happened. Never happened. It never happened in her world. It only happened to me. But it was already in my chart. It was already part of my karma to have that. That was just the thing that sort of like brought it into the focus. And my reaction to it was much greater than another child or any other person. It was much greater because it was my karma to have that. So the childhood and the past lives gets kind of mixed in together. There's some conditioning that can come from reading books and from watching movies and other things on media of different kinds, TV and the internet and so forth. You know, we can develop kind of beliefs about things, and now we can get upset because something's not going according to what we read or saw or believe now from that. So this is where we get all these things. And this conditioning causes, it's a belief that something is bad. Every time we react negatively to something our partner says or does, if you look carefully, if you go into it, and I suggest you feel into it first, you'll get to a story there. There's a story there. There's a story of negativity. Like somebody, they don't love me, or they don't care enough about me, or they don't think I'm worth anything, you know, something like that. There's always a story that causes the reaction of feeling unloved and hurt, okay? So all of our suffering in life comes from these conditioned responses, okay? All of them. And every single one of these conditioned responses will someday have to be looked at, have to be met, face on, experienced, and let go of. Okay, we're going to talk about what to do about this. Conditioned responses always place blame on other people or situations. Mostly we push out with it, and sometimes with anger or with judgments. And all that is because we just don't want to feel how hurtful that feels. The suffering that's coming up in us, we can't seem to contain that, so we have to push it out. And we have to throw it on somebody else. Call them names or backlash against them. We don't want to feel the pain of living in the story that we actually believe is true. So, there's a solution to this. It's one of the hardest things anybody will ever do, I think, because you have to, number one, start with what my partner says or does is none of my business. We think it's about us. We think everything that they've done is about us. But it's not. It's not about us. They're just doing what they're doing. That's what they do. They're doing what they're doing. They have their own reasons, and we really don't know. We think we know. Our story tells us that we know what they're doing, and it's bad, and it's not about us, but it's not. So the first thing that has to happen is you have to stop blaming your partner. You just have to restrain yourself against that, and it's very hard to do. Tell me, I've had the most difficult time with that, because I have a lot of Mars in my chart, and Mars and Aries energy just wants to go out and have a war with somebody. But it has to start there. And then the next thing is we have to be willing to go in and feel that pain that we're feeling with curiosity and bring some awareness into it. Not like letting our mind run off into like, what are we going to say to our partner? How are we going to get them back? What are we going to say? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Or I'm going to make plans to leave. Where am I going to go? I got to leave this relationship. Like, stop that all mental thing. You have to stop that and go into the heart where the feeling is, where there's a feeling of really deep hurt. And let yourself be with that. And you be there for that hurt. You be there for your own hurt. You be the one that's holding yourself for that hurt. And be curious about it. Like, what's the story about? What's inside of this? What's the story that's activated here? Where did I get that? Is it true? Is it really true? Am I truly a worthless person? This is a big one for me. Being a double diamond, all about worth. Am I unlovable? Am I ugly? Am I unattractive? Do people hate me? There's 100 or 1,000 stories like this. But only through the feeling and going into it can we actually get to the bottom of it. And I tell you, the moment you start doing this and stop lashing out at your partner, they're going to change on you for the better. And you didn't do anything to make them change, because the real problem was always in here. It was always you. It was never them. And my teacher, one of my spiritual teachers, she talks about her partner and she says, well, he's been my greatest spiritual teacher. My greatest teacher is my husband and her children. And these are the relationships that get us the most. These are the ones that really get us the most. So we're going to talk about this a little more in more lessons to come. But if you think about this and dwell on this a little bit, I think you could find that this is where you can start to have an amazing relationship like you've never experienced before. But it has to start with you. And this is not bullshit. This is something that we have to do. Nobody can do it for us. It's a one-man job. It's an inside job. A one-woman job, whatever. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed this. We will have another lessons soon. Thank you for watching.